Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer because we have a lot to unpack. Today, we're looking at how K-pop group i-dle is successfully pulling off something that's practically unheard of. They are navigating this incredibly high-stakes transition from a traditional manufactured idol framework into a permanent working artist identity. If you've been following their recent moves, you know for sure that something fundamental has shifted. So we're going to break down exactly how they're executing what is arguably one of the hardest maneuvers in the entire music industry.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the comeback delays strategy, then move to pivoting from the i-dle framework, finding their true essence, Cube's structural necessity, the 2027 contract horizon, and finally wrap it up with a sophisticated new partnership.
All right, part one, the comeback delay strategy. So when Cube Entertainment officially pushed i-dle's full group comeback from May to July 2026, standard fandom anxieties totally flared up. And, in corporate K-pop, a delay is almost always interpreted as a sign of distress. But if we read between the lines of Cube's statements, it reveals a very different reality. The audio reporting was reportedly already done around February or March. That extra window, it wasn't about the music itself at all. They actually needed that time for global promotional packaging, concept videos, and all the visual materials. And here's why that delay was honestly brilliant. Entering the meat grinder of a release window in May would have massively fragmented consumer attention. I mean, look at this list. By dodging concurrent, high-profile releases from aespa, Les Seraphim, ITZY, and NMIX, i-dle preserved their chart impact. The big takeaway here is that they took a potential operational bottleneck and transformed it into a highly calculated launchpad for a much deeper identity shift. Moving on to part two, pivoting from the i-dle framework. The standard industry narrative often just boxes i-dle in as a highly successful fourth-generation girl group. But honestly, that misses the broader picture entirely. Just look at these incredibly calculated career maneuvers over the last 2 quarters. First, Shuhwa was cast as the lead in a film by an acclaimed award-winning international director. That aligns her with prestige cinema, not some low-stakes commercial web drama. Then, their January single Mosino featured Skywater, an artist completely detached from the traditional K-pop ecosystem. Guys, these are the moves of a permanent working artist identity, not your standard idol group. And then there's their touring strategy, which is a real game changer. Instead of grinding out a 10-city North American arena tour, which, let's face it, is facing massive market saturation and pricing fatigue right now, they strategically pivoted to the T-Mobile stage at Lollapalooza Chicago. Why does this matter? Well, it reduces their operational exposure, while simultaneously putting them right in front of a massive mainstream demographic that extends way, way beyond their existing fan base. Which brings us to part 3, finding their true essence. For years, the G in their original name operated as this awkward, hyper-localized qualifier that even the members themselves really weren't attached to. But successfully negotiating to just drop it on their 7th anniversary, that was a massive flex of artist leverage. It wasn't just some administrative gift handed down from the label. No way. It was a mandatory clause they secured during contract renewals. It allowed them to finally claim their true name and an identity completely untethered from gender expectations. Now, the really crucial point here is the musical shift itself. Producer Soyeon noticed everything in the industry was just escalating in this flashy loudness and algorithmic repetition, and she made a totally conscious choice that she couldn't continue in that direction. Instead, she redirected her focus inward to the absolute essence of music. That's how we got tracks like Mono, which trade those explosive, predictable beat switches for disarming restraint, soft pulses, and this beautiful negative space. Soyeon's leadership style is just absolutely fascinating here. This cinematic metaphor she uses explains perfectly how she draws out these idiosyncratic contributions from each of the members. Rather than acting as the sole rigid architect, she operates way more like a film director. She pushes the members to initiate new compositions, even when they're struggling with self-doubt. Honestly, this is how working producers talk about their workflow, not typical idol group leaders. Across their deeply revealing paper interview, members like Minnie, Mion, and Yuki constantly return to this vocabulary of sincerity, essence, freedom, and individuality. This level of individual specificity, where each member articulates a distinct personal relationship to this collective shift, is genuinely impressive. It's almost impossible to manufacture that as a corporate PR script. They are genuinely trying to get closer to who they really are. And this mindset beautifully translates to their rock-influenced track, Crow. Soyeon actually wrote this during a period of extreme public skepticism regarding the group's very survival. You might remember their brutal 14-month hiatus back in 2021, before Tomboy came out. By actively reclaiming the imagery of the crow, flipping it from a sinister omen into a symbol of pure resilience, they broadcasted their new, unshakable operational ethos to the world. But, of course, this brings us face to face with a rather harsh business reality. How do you evolve your creative identity while practically funding a publicly traded agency? Because evolving artistically while simultaneously maintaining the massive cash flow requirements of a label that relies on physical album bundles and legacy media promotions, that is quite literally the equivalent of rebuilding an aircraft mid-flight. So let's look at part 4, Cube's structural necessity. We have to look closely at Cube Entertainment's position to actually understand why they're going along with i-dle's creative autonomy. Because in commerce, a survival instinct is always more reliable than goodwill. Cube lacks the massive capital reserves and multi-label cushioning of the Big Four agencies. Plus, they have no other rookie acts matching these profit margins. So i-dle is not just their flagship asset, they are effectively Cube's financial firewall. Their business interests are completely aligned for absolute survival. Now, while the interests of the label and the group are structurally aligned right now, it's not a perfect setup. Short-term revenue dips are incredibly risky for a mid-tier agency. If the label's numbers drop even a little, they could easily panic and try to force conservative, highly commercialized strategies that would totally clash with i-dle's new minimalist artistic vision. Which perfectly tees up Part 5, the 2027 contract horizon. Just take a look at this trajectory. In late 2024, they secured a 3-year collective renewal. By locking in this institutional stability early, they gained a roughly 16-month runway from their July 2026 comeback to really demonstrate the success of their artistic transition. And they get to do this all before heading back to the negotiating table in November 2027. This is a massive takeaway for us. Stability is the core resource that makes a pivot like this possible. Making a clean exit from a position of demonstrated successful direction is strategically so much stronger than having to negotiate from the messy, volatile middle of a rebranding process. They literally set themselves up with maximum leverage.
And finally, Part 6, a sophisticated new partnership.
Ultimately, i-dle operates completely differently than a traditional top-down corporate hierarchy. They essentially function as a peer-to-peer partnership. So-yeon absolutely maintains uncompromised creative control, sure, but this decentralized model expanded massively in May 2025 with the release of We Are. For that project, all 5 members actively contributed to the writing and composition of the entire tracklist. It's a real team effort. Career pivots are undeniably messy, right? But by distributing the creative weight among all the members, i-dle ensures their decisions are driven by genuine internal artistry, not arbitrary boardroom mandates. They've effectively bulletproofed their identity against external market shocks. They might not be at the very top of the monthly brand reputation rankings right this second, or run in the exact same short-term metrics race as other top groups, but i-dle is charting a highly sustainable path on their own terms, dictated by a real creative pulse. As they prove that surviving the noise means turning inward, it leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question. What does i-dle's permanent artist identity actually mean for the future of the K-pop idol model? And who in the industry will be brave enough to follow their lead? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.